But do you have football nearby you?
Yeah, I got one.
So for those of you who don't know, Kellyn Gerenstein here, he plays club football at Ohio State. He's probably the best quarterback who doesn't play college football at the actual NCAA level. All right. This guy knows what the hell he's talking about when it comes to playing the quarterback position. And what you're talking to me about was, Justin Fields' arm angle and how a lot of the new quarterbacks are being taught a different way to throw. So we're going to kind of visualize it here. Show me what you're talking about, the way these quarterbacks are throwing now that is being taught differently from what it was before when you're talking about the hip torso and stuff like that. We're going to do sort of a visual breakdown here.
Yeah. So I think when a lot of people visualize a quarterback, we're like coming over the top like this, like I'm keeping my elbow high and I'm like this L is happening here. A lot of guys now are dropping this angle to kind of like in between, like a 3/4 kind of.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see a lot of guys are doing that now. You watch Brady, obviously Rodgers, Josh Allen's doing it, Kyler Murray is doing it, Lamar Jackson is doing it, Russell Wilson's still kind of like an over the top thrower, but for the most part, like all those guys are trying to get more rotational velocity because if you're coming here, you're bringing your arm down.
Yeah.
The follow through is happening at your hip. So I'm following through and I'm down here. What a lot of guys now are doing is they're trying to finish at the rib cage. Trey Lance is like the best example of it because his ball like will dip and he's literally like his arm angle is more like almost dead ass sidearm and they'll finish here. But the idea, I think for, I'm not the best quarterback trainer in the world, but just from what I've learned and what I've tried to study is this is all trying to get rotational velocity from the hips, right? Like we're trying to eliminate a lot of the stuff that's going on with the upper body, not try and focus on that and try and get everything going in this torque, right? We're trying to torque and we're trying to keep our shoulders square because if I'm throwing like this, a lot of times this is uneven, right? Like this is going in a line like this. If I'm throwing from this side, from this action over here, I got more stability along that like horizontal plane. So it's a lot. And I don't think too much of it makes a difference, but I do think that it shortens the stroke for a lot of guys and it feels a little bit more natural. And I think it eliminates arm pain as well. So this shoulder is going to feel a little bit better coming from here than it is up here.
That's surprising almost because, as baseball players, anytime you try to go with the sidearm throw, like there's always more pain, but it's typically like the elbow area. So if you're talking about shoulder, you're right. So when you talk about, for those who are listening to this in the podcast form, I'm sorry that we're doing this little visual representation. You can watch what we're talking about on YouTube. This video will be available on our page for forever. So whenever you want to get to it, you can watch what we're talking about here. But for that torque, so are they doing that? They're trying to get more torque just so they get a little bit more zip on the ball? Is that okay?
Yeah. So what I always describe it as like, are you a plateau thrower or are you an apex thrower? Does your ball just carry and then apex and then it's back down? Or do you have the velocity to get like a plateau on it and for it to be at its top speed for not an extended period of time, but for longer than just a moment? That's how I kind of describe it. And it really is big on those drive throws outside of the numbers and those, intermediate to deep throws in between the hashes in the middle of the field. I think that's where it makes the most difference. And also it helps getting the ball around defenders, right? I think a lot of times.
Oh, he does that all the time.
Yeah. People confuse like, almost every quarterback in football is shorter than his offensive lineman. So it's really never about like seeing over guys. Like everyone finds a window, unless you're like Trevor Lawrence, Brock Osweiler, Mike Glennon. Those guys are really tall. But for the most part, like Brady, Rodgers, those guys aren't like, they're not towering over their tackles. They're not towering over their guards. So all those guys have to find windows and they have to find angles where they can whip it around, and anticipate throws. So that's what has changed the most to me about Justin Fields' motion. I think a lot of people really overdid it. Like Dan Orlovsky had that segment on ESPN before the draft. I'll never forget it, where he was comparing like the time to like when the ball separated to when it was getting released, and Justin Fields was so much longer than everyone else. And that's it. It's longer. It happens. What you live with it, because I said to you today, it's loopy. It was loopy, but it was snappy. So I never had a huge problem with it. And I'm glad he has shortened it even more than it, that's always a good thing, shortening your release. But keep an eye on that when you watch quarterbacks this year. See how many of them are finishing this throw here, instead of like down at the hip area.
Yeah, and that's actually really, as you talk about the torque and the force and the momentum that he's getting on his throws, turning his body. I mean, that's something that I really noticed about him, and compared to other guys, it's like when you watch him, like he's really whipping that body around, and like and his ball just has some natural zip to it, man. Like you can tell, like that ball has some zip, even when he's just warming it up. We were watching him warming up, and I was like, damn, like that ball has zip on it, and almost seemed like a little bit more zip than last year again. And I think a lot of it comes from the fact that he's just he whips that body around. He really uses his body to an advantage. And I feel like, again, take a guy like Mitch, right? And I'm just using Mitch because he's the most recent example I have from like a visual standpoint. Is like that guy almost, it seemed like he was like all arm the way he threw, right? Like he was all arm. You didn't see a lot of the body incorporated in the way he was throwing the ball. Like there wasn't a lot of torque when he threw the ball, and like he could zip it. Like Mitch could zip it in there at times, but like from a mechanics point, from what you're talking about with like, okay, this is, the new mechanics where you're dropping that arm slide and you're trying to get that body around and maximum torque. Like that's not there for a guy like him. And for a lot of guys in the league who, just don't have that zip. And it's like, and this is a common thing in sports. Like it's the same way for baseball. And it's like a lot of it comes from the legs as well. And that's why people talk about, getting your footing right, right. I mean, and tell me like the importance of the legs there as well, because in baseball, it's the sport that I play. Like, if I'm in center field and I'm launching it home, oh my God, my arm's going to be destroyed if I don't use my legs to my advantage. Like you really have to get your legs into it. But when you're a quarterback and you're standing still, like, is there anything with his legs, because all the talk has been arm rotation, did you see anything in the legs that you thought needed to be changed?
The stride is shorter.
Okay.
I always had this problem when I was getting trained in high school. Matt Slusher, who used to coach at Crete, I'm in Flossmoor, so we're south suburbs. Coach Slush, if you're watching this, appreciate you. But the thing with me was I was always trying to as I move my chair and get up, right? This is funny. I was always trying to overemphasize this step, that they call it like a foot strike, or, whatever happens. Like if I'm boxing, I'm taking that step. I was always trying to overstep. And when I did that, when I came to throw, my leg, you can't see it because my computer just doesn't get like that, but my leg was locked. So I was coming over my front foot.
Right.
So a lot of times I think with young quarterbacks, that's a lot of what they're doing, because they think they just have to really stride and try and get as much like force on that front foot.
Okay.
You're trying to balance it as much. You're trying the same weight that was on your back foot before the throw should be the same amount of weight on your front foot when you're throwing. So now notice that stride with Justin Fields, it's not all the way here. It's just boom. Like it's kind of in the same spot you pick it up from. Pick it up and put it down. So that's a big thing. And to any young quarterbacks who are out there watching this, or just people who like the position and want to learn more about it, that's a big thing. When you're coaching someone, teach them to not lock their front leg out. Don't take that big foot strike step. So that's cool. I love talking. As you can tell, I love talking QB mechanics.
Oh, I love it. That's why I wanted to get you. I knew this is what you love to do. So I was like, I gotta get him in his element. But it's relevant stuff because we've seen the reports. I don't know if you saw this, and of course, the clickbait of Bears Facebook. I've seen it all over. But I don't know who the hell said it. But one guy said he's heard from a source that Justin Fields is, quote, having like the most significant jump from year 1 to year 2 from a quarterback that people have ever seen. Right. Oh my God. It's the biggest jump ever. I'm not going to buy into that. Right. Like we think Justin Fields is good enough regardless. I'm not going to say, oh my God, he's making the biggest jump year 1 to year 2 of all.
That's just setting him up for unrealistic expectations.
Yeah. And also, like, what does that even mean? Right. Like, how do you even quantify that? Right. So I don't get what that means. But nonetheless, like there's differences, right? There's changes and there's positive changes. Like, and you want to see those positive changes. Like those things matter. And we see it in the mechanics, and, it's positive stuff that, he's getting the ball out quick. And man, the arm angles with this guy, like, again, this is part of his baseball background. And I noticed it because they do a lot when they were doing that play action delay that I posted on Instagram, right? Where this is huge, right? This is how Aaron Rodgers torched us every fucking time on national television, right? I don't even know if I can do it here. I think because he takes a snap and then he like fakes the handoff and then he like fakes the ball. Yeah. He puts his hand here and he kind of tucks the ball in, and then he rolls out. And every time he's rolling out, he's throwing it like he's throwing it like this. I got a torn shoulder, so it's hard for me to do this motion. But like every time every time he's getting the ball there and that arm angle. And like when you think about the way they're going to use him in play action and getting the ball out quick to the flat to like a Darnell Mooney, like he's using that arm angle, and that's where he's at his best. I think when he's doing those types of throws is when you're like, holy shit. Like think about the throw against San Francisco last year. You know, that one is cross body throw. Yes. Justin James, right? Jesse yes, James, or Jesse. Sorry, Jesse James.
I know exactly
I think he did it to Mooney. He might have done it to Mooney in the series game. I don't know, but you know what I'm talking about. Like that's where Justin Fields is going to elevate himself. And I said this to you. I said this is and you said, you know, this is all the young quarterbacks now. Like this is how they take it to the next level. Absolutely. This is what separates Justin Fields from the rest of the pack and why we think he's going to be a top quarterback in the NFC for the rest of his career.
That's one thing that Mitch really struggled with was changing that arm angle. You know, if he had to get it around somewhere, he really couldn't throw from here. Mitch was always kind of up here. And it just limits the plays that you as a quarterback can make. It doesn't really limit you as a play caller, but like you can only do so much as a coach. That's why you draft good football players. That's why you sign good football players. We talked about it earlier. That's why it's so important. And that's why the whole Mac Jones over, you know, Trey and Justin at you know, for San Francisco at 3, that discourse was really killing me because he can't do those things. And Mac is good. His ceiling is just nowhere near Trey Lance and Justin Fields, in my opinion, because it just not just because of that, but that is one of the reasons, right? That matters so much in this offense. You're right, because the drill that we're talking about, you know, Andrew Janako was playing the backside squeeze defensive end, right? So he's either, you know, trying to come underneath and chase the quarterback, and Justin Fields has to outrun him and make the throw, or he's sitting in the throwing lane, and that's where Justin Fields has to stop and deliver it, you know, because if he's throwing over the top there, that ball's going right in the throwing